going through and worse, who can testify that you can make it.
Dr. Tony Evans says we need to learn to look past our problems to discover the strength of our faith.
We're staring at what we're going through. We're not staring at the joy set before us. That is the promises of God to be completed on our behalf.
This is The Alternative with Dr. Tony Evans, author, speaker, senior pastor of Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship in Dallas, Texas, and president of the Urban Alternative. Whatever you're going through, it helps to know you're not alone. Today, Dr. Evans will tell us about people who faced bigger challenges than we're ever likely to see and what we can learn from their experience. Let's join him.
The writer of the book of Hebrews is writing to a people who are discouraged. In fact, if you are discouraged, the book of Hebrews is for you. There are numbers of books that speak to our discouragement. The book of Hebrews is dedicated to that. These are Jewish Christians who are discouraged. Things are not going well, and many of them are prepared to give up, quit, throw in the towel, and walk away from their faith. They would say, like many of us have said, on many occasions, this faith thing is not working. They're about to lose hope. That's what he says at the end of verse 3. He says, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Faith is a persuasion or a conviction about the reality of something you cannot see. In fact, he has said that in chapter 11, verse 1. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. Of course, as Christians, our hope is in God. So if God is real, and therefore he is the object of our hope, faith has something to grab hold of. If God is not real, then faith is grasping after the air. He writes to these discouraged Christians, and he wants to encourage them to persevere in faith. Don't quit, don't give up, don't throw in the towel, even though it's tough. To maintain your Christian commitment through the vicissitudes, challenges of life. Through the difficulties that you're going through. He's saying, don't you quit. Don't you give up, even though you're going uphill right now. Don't be weary and lose heart. To encourage them in their perseverance of faith, or the not losing of their confidence. What he says to them is therefore, in chapter 12, verse 1. Since we have so great a cloud of witnesses, he says, you have somebody who can testify. In other words, you're not the first person who's been where you are. There are other folk who've been through what you're going through and worse, who can testify that you can make it. Now, the witnesses to which he is referring are the witnesses found in chapter 11. Chapter 11 is often called the Hall of Faith. It is a listing of men and women who, through the challenges and changes of life, persevered through faith, even though it was difficult. He says, you have a cloud of witnesses. Let me reverse that statement. He says, hang out with spiritual winners, not spiritual losers. Hang out with folk who are persevering in faith. That's what chapter 11 is. He's telling you to hang out with those kind of people. See, one of the reasons we give up is because we hang out with the wrong folk. One of the reasons why God insists that every Christian be part of a spiritual family is for that reason. As you've often heard me say, You don't need a church to have a sermon. You can get that off a radio or a CD or television. You don't need a church to get a good song. You can get those through the same ways. But the reason God insists on Christians being part of a spiritual family is so that you have a community of winners to hang out with. What do these witnesses help you to do? It says to lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us. The way we're supposed to help each other, which is the same way the people of faith in chapter 11 helps us, is to remove, he says, any encumbrance and the sin. An encumbrance is extra baggage that slows you down. An encumbrance is weight that you don't need to be carrying. An encumbrance is not necessarily something wrong in and of itself. It's just that you can't make maximum progress with it. But then he goes on and he says, the reason why we need the witnesses is to deal with the sin that traps us. It's often called the besetting sin. Please notice, he uses the word in explaining the sin entangles us. And he's not talking about sins plural because he has the definite article in front of the word sin. So he's talking about a specific sin, the sin, not the sins. Okay? Now, all of us have any number of sins, that is, failure to meet God's standard, that could be operating in our lives at any given time. Sins of thought, sins of words, sins of deeds. But his concern is not the sins, it is the sin, single. And he says this is a special sin because it entangles us. It trips us up. Well, the whole subject of the book of Hebrews and what he is focused on in chapter 11 and here in chapter 12 is faith. The sin that entangles us is the sin of unbelief. When there is unbelief, failure to act like God is telling the truth, you've now bundled up all the other sins in that one sin. The sin of faithlessness. It's like the college student who wanted to wash his clothes, but he didn't want to spend a lot of time. So he put out a sheet. He put his dirty underwear on the sheet, dirty t-shirts on the sheet, dirty socks on the sheet. He took dirty clothes, put it on the sheet, and then he took the four corners of the sheet and tied it up into a bundle. In other words, he took the dirt here, the dirt there, the dirt there, and entangled them in one sheet. He put the whole sheet tied up into the washer. Okay? Well, everything came out dirty because they had been entangled in this one thing. See, we're trying to fix this, beep, beep. We're trying to fix all this stuff. In fact, we can't even keep up with all the stuff we're trying to fix, right? Because we got this, we got that, we got that. He says, if you can untangle this one thing, it addresses everything else, because fundamentally, sins plural is a failure to trust God, sin singular. If we ever learn to believe God, act like God is telling the truth, he says we untangle, because we deal with the one sin that tangles up everything else. He says if we remove the encumbrance, that's not necessarily wrong, it just gets in the way. And if we deal with the sin, unbelief, that is responsible for every other thing, then he says at the end of verse 1, we will be able to run with endurance the race that is set before us. As a Christian, we're supposed to be runners, not walkers or joggers. Most certainly not crawlers. He says you're supposed to be running. That is, you and I are supposed to be moving forward in our Christian life. One of the things the book of Hebrews talks about is the stagnant Christian. Putting it another way, if you're not moving forward, you are moving backwards because you're never staying still. Okay? If you're not moving forward, progressing in our Christian experience, we are regressing in our Christian experience because we're not moving forward. And he says you're supposed to be running at a clip. You're supposed to be moving, progressing in your spiritual experience. You've got a witness. The witness is to remove things that are unnecessary, even though they may not be wrong, an encumbrance, and to deal with the sin to learn to live by faith. Now, why must we deal with that sin? Because Hebrews 11:6 says, without faith, it is impossible to please God. In other words, without this trust relationship, you cannot please God. No matter whatever else you're doing, if faith is not your modus operandi, if faith is not how you roll, it is impossible. Nothing else can replace the life of faith. And the life of faith is not, floating in Never Never Land. It is the feet. It is acting like God is telling the truth.
Dr. Evans will explain how that act turns into reality when he continues our message in just a moment. First, though, don't miss out on your last chance to get a copy of Tony's current teaching series as our gift. Comforting the Afflicted is a 6-message look at why God allows painful circumstances to come our way, how he cares for us as we're going through them, and how he uses them to build our strength and devotion. It includes bonus material we haven't been able to present on the air, and if you contact us today, it's yours with our thanks when you make any contribution, large or small, to support the ministry of the alternative. So visit us before the day's out at tonyevans.org or call us at 1-800-800-3222, make your donation, and let us send you Comforting the Afflicted. Again, that's tonyevans.org. Or call us day or night at 1-800-800-3222 and let one of our staff members help you. 1-800-800-3222. Well, right now, Dr. Evans is back with more of today's lesson. Let's join him.
Verse 1 tells us what we ought to do. We ought to run the race. And we ought to run the race with endurance. This is not a sprint. He says, fixing your eyes on how Jesus, the man, related to his Father. When I get on the treadmill, you can bet your bottom dollar on one thing. I will only get on the treadmill when I can simultaneously watch television. Because it's boring, it's unmotivating, and it's too tiring. Whenever you go to all these gyms, what do they have? TVs on the treadmill. What they give you is something to fix your eyes on while you're running. Because running is tiring, running is difficult. You're sweating, you're perspiring, you're huffing, you're puffing. But if you have the right distraction, if you have the right fixation, you're able to run further, you're able to run longer because you're not focused on you. He says, fixating your eyes on Jesus. Here it is, because he is the author and the perfecter of our faith. Okay, let me tell you, the author means originator, perfecter means completer. The author means get you started, perfecter means get you finished. He fires the gun at the starting block, bang, author. Then he runs and meets you at the finish line, perfecter. Author and perfecter means beginning and end and everything in between. All right? He said, if I can get you to stare at Jesus, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. Oh, wait a minute now. He says, let me show you what I mean by fixation. Jesus endured the cross, that was suffering. But the reason he could handle the suffering is because of the joy set before him. So something was in front of Jesus that he kept staring at that let him endure what he was going through. Okay, you follow me? Something was in front of him that brought joy, that allowed him to endure what he was going through. One of the motivations to keep going is the joyful expectation of graduation day. If you can see graduation day, you can endure math. If you can see graduation day, you can endure biology. It may not be your favorite course, but if you stare at the course that you don't like or it's too hard, you might drop out. But if you can see graduation day, or you can see the job opportunity, or you can see the career goal, if you can see it, it will help you to endure what you're going through to get what you can see. He says God has set before Jesus a joy. What did Jesus see? Philippians tells us that at the name of Jesus, every knee would bow. That at the name of Jesus, every tongue would confess. That at the name of Jesus, everyone above the earth, on the earth, under the earth, would acknowledge that Jesus is Lord. He kept staring beyond the cross to the resurrection, to the recognition of the lordship of Jesus Christ. He kept staring at that, which allowed him to handle what he was going through. We're staring at what we're going through. We're not staring at the joy set before us. That is the promises of God to be completed on our behalf. And so we stop walking through the trouble because we stop staring at graduation day. He says, fixate your eyes on Jesus. Keep staring, become fixated on him. You remember, we've shared it a couple of times about Carrie Stuggs and the 1996 Olympics, when she had to get a 9.7 for the U.S. gymnastic team to win the competition. She was the last one. And so she did the vault. And when she did the vault and did her flips, she came down and sprained her ankle. Terrible sprain. Fell down and couldn't walk. And only had one more jump left. And she had made a 9.7. And everything was dependent upon this last jump, last vault. She was hurting. She was in pain. She was trying to endure it, but she couldn't even put her foot down without her grimacing. When afterwards, after the competition was over, she was asked, how did you make it? She said, I kept staring at my coach. She said, I was feeling my pain, but I kept staring at my coach. And my coach said, Carrie, you can do it. Carrie, you can do it. I believe in you, girl. You can do it. I know you're hurting, but you can do it. I believe in you. She said, I was feeling pain, but I was fixated on my coach. I was feeling hurt, but I was fixated on my coach. I was feeling discouragement that all this pressure was on me, but I kept staring at my coach. And then Carrie came around for the last time, not even barely able to walk, couldn't even put her foot down. So halfway running, halfway hobbling, because you got to be able to get a good start to do that thing. Then you got to jump on the springboard, so that's pressure on it. Then you got to flip, and then you have to land completely standing up with both feet down. That was an impossibility given her condition. But she said, I was so inspired by my coach. I was so inspired by his faith when I didn't have faith. He became the author and the finisher of my faith. I didn't have faith, but he had faith. I didn't have hope, but he had hope. I didn't have perseverance, but he had perseverance. So guess what I did? I piggybacked on my coach. And since I piggybacked on his faith, he became the author and finisher of my faith. So I was able to finish the vault, and she hit a 9.8 or something, which gave the U.S. team victory. And I'll never forget, because I was watching on TV, she hit down, whop, boom, and brought that one leg back up because she couldn't handle the pressure. But she hit first, then brought it up, and everybody knew that this girl had done something that she didn't think on her own she can do. Jesus, in his humanity, is the author and finisher of your faith. You say, but I can't make it. That's okay. Just keep looking at Jesus and piggyback off of his faith. piggyback off of his confidence. Piggyback off of him. That's why Jesus has got to be your focus, because he will give you the ability to run when you can't run anymore. He'll give you the ability to keep going when you can't keep going anymore. He will give you the ability to sustain yourself when you can't be sustained anymore. Keep your eyes on Jesus. Talk about the Olympics. It was the 1992 Olympics. And his name was Derrick Redmon. It was a 4x400 relay. Derrick Redmon was one of the sprinters for the British team. As Derrick Redmon took the baton and began to run, he fell to the ground because he tore his Achilles tendon. Now, if you understand that, you can't move. You're in excruciating pain. And the whole world watched as Derrick Redmon laid on the track crying. Crying because of the pain and crying because his team would now lose the race because he couldn't even crawl. That's when something odd happened. Something weird. A man came from the top of the stands down to the track and rushed onto the track and grabbed Derrick Redmon around his waist and put Derrick Redmon's arm around his shoulders and drug Derrick Redmon across the finish line. That was Derrick Redmon's father. Derrick Redmon's father was up high, looking low. He saw his son not able to make it. He saw his son broke down in the race. But he loved his son. So he left up high and came down low, grabbed his son and drug him across the finish line. God knows you can't run no further. God knows you're tired, weary, and afflicted. But even though he sits high, he looks low. And he knows your pain and your hurt. And he wants to come down and pick you up, and if he has to, drag you across your finish line. You are going to make it in spite of how you feel. You are going to make it in spite of what you're going through. But you got to fix your eyes on Jesus.
Dr. Evans will come back in just a moment with a final thought to wrap up his series, Comforting the Afflicted. So be sure to stay with us. As I mentioned earlier, today's the last day to get a copy of this 6-lesson CD series as our gift. It's perfect to review on your own or share with your small group or Bible study. And it's yours with our thanks for any contribution you can make, no matter the size, to help us keep Tony's teaching on this station. Just visit tonyevans.org to get the details and make the arrangements before the day's out. Our Resource Center is also open 24/7 for your convenience. Just call us at 1-800-800-3222, and one of our team members will help you. The title again, Comforting the Afflicted. Nobody sets their sights on just being mediocre, but Dr. Evans says that's the highest standard too many Christians seem to achieve. Tomorrow, he'll start a brand new series on rising up to what he calls the Jesus Challenge. You'll find out what he means when you join us. Right now, though, he's back with this final comment for today.
Keep your eyes on Jesus. Don't give up. I know you're tired. I know, varying degrees, various struggles. I know you're tired. I know you want to give up. I know because I've talked to some of you. I've heard your cries. The Father stands ready to help you.
The Alternative with Dr. Tony Evans is brought to you by the Urban Alternative and is made possible by the generous contributions of listeners like you.